Welcome back to Zero in Michigan podcast. On today's show, we have as our guest Jeff DeNooyer. So I'll let Jeff introduce himself.
Yeah, well, thank you. Appreciate you guys having me. Yeah, like I said, my name is Jeff DeNooyer. I am part of automotive family here in Southwest Michigan, the DeNooyer Automotive Group. I'm the general manager of DeNooyer Ford in Vicksburg, Michigan. We also have a Toyota, Chevrolet store, Jaguar up in Kalamazoo. And so that's kind of my background is I grew up in the car business, fourth generation car business guy, actually. My great grandfather started over in Battle Creek. But I've always been a car guy. Started out V8s, but once I kind of got exposed to the electric side, I've found a passion there as well. And actually started a company about 3 years ago, almost now, getting into charger installation and that kind of stuff. And so that's called EVSE Evolution, where we do residential and commercial EV service equipment installations for dealer customers, for our clients that purchase EVs, as well as anybody that needs it. So that's kind of the high level of who I am.
Great. Well, thanks, Jeff. So as someone who just bought a Tesla
Sure,
on the price dip, so sorry I didn't go through the dealership.
that's
And
all
maybe
right.
that's a good talking point actually. We're finding that people are not necessarily always happy with the dealership experience. And I don't want to say that universally. There's certainly a lot of positives to having a dealership nearby. Maintenance is one that I can think of. We could explore that later. Kind of what's your thought? What differentiates you from dealerships where people come back who are looking for an EV and say, you know what, these guys didn't have a clue. So what do you think that you can do differently, or what are you doing differently with
Yeah.
your sales staff?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of training early on, and I think we're still in the early days of adoption on EV, even in our organization, although I do think we are ahead of a lot of folks. Partially, I don't want to take all the credit, but it's been a passion project of mine for probably, like I said, at least the last 2 or 3 years as I've gotten exposed to the business through that other venture with Easy Evolution. And it's something I've really gotten passionate about, and you see where the industry is going, and we recognize that we need to pivot and accommodate that a lot better. I think you're right. Oftentimes the dealer, I would say it's kind of the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of us, or 80% give us, the rest of the 80 of us a bad name, right? You have that bad experience, somebody doesn't really know what's going on. And I think by and large, there's a lot of dealerships out there that do want to help customers. They want to address their concerns and things like that, and to be able to help them purchase an EV or make an educated decision with that. But there's still a lot of skepticism out there. I think even in our organization too, but one thing that I was really proud that we were able to do just about a month ago is Carl actually came and joined us at our organization up in Kalamazoo, and I brought everybody or a lot of folks in from all the other stores to do kind of just a 101 learning session. And the number of people that came to me after the fact and just kind of said, hey, that totally changed my perspective on EV. Like I was still kind of in that, like, hey, it's kind of still early days. The infrastructure can't handle it. This, I don't know what we're doing, wasting all the time on this. I think they really opened their eyes um, to what the EV movement kind of really is and what the opportunities in the sense that the vehicles themselves give a great driving experience that I think our customers want above and beyond just some of the environmental benefits or whatever it may be. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about it. And so, unfortunately, we probably had people that were perpetuating some of that over the years, but I think the more we can do to educate, the more benefit we'll have. And one thing I'm looking to develop here for our Ford store too is part of Ford's Model E program, as we've enrolled in that program, is get my staff an opportunity to drive one, not just for a day, but I think for a week or so is kind of my goal, because I think that really gives you an idea of what the ownership life cycle really or ownership experience really is. You can take one for a quick test drive, hit the accelerator and be blown away, like, hey, this is the coolest thing I've ever driven, right? And that's great. And I think a lot of people do that. But I think the next piece of it is drive it and experience what it means to deplete the battery down to 20% and where you can find charging, what that, and actually how convenient that can be if you have a charger at your home or at your work or something like that. And I think that is where it clicks for them, is really realizing, hey, this is a really awesome driving experience, and that's great, but I can actually fit this into my lifestyle, because that's, we often get the, well, I can't go on big road trips. It's like, well, when's the last time you drove to Florida? I guess flying now is kind of expensive, but it's for a lot of people I talk to, it's like you're not driving more than 200 or 300 miles a day, unless you're a traveling salesman. For most people commuting to and from work, it's actually a great option. So maybe probably a longer explanation you're
No, no, no,
looking
this
for.
is great. I mean, you've hit on so many points. And first of all, yeah, thanks for inviting me. I mean, we all wear different hats. As you've just said, you wear one hat as in your dealership, another one for your easy evolution. For me personally, we do this podcast, but I'm also EV education and outreach coordinator at Consumers Energy. So in that role, Jeff invited me down to the dealership, and that's the first time any dealerships ever invited me to do that. I mean, I've dropped off literature on our home charger rebates at different dealership, but nobody's ever reached out and come back and said, hey, can you do some kind of education piece? Yeah. And I don't even know where to unpack all the stuff you said. You're exactly right. In our internal group, I've actually struggled to get people to take an EV if they're not EV owners and
Mhm.
drive it, like you said, for more than just a day. It's fun to do a Tesla launch. That's what hooks people sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then the next piece is, yeah, let's drive it for a day, a week, a month, and then actually experience how that works. How does the charging work? And of course, it could be a little bit difficult if they don't have level 2 charging at home. So, you can give them
Mhm.
the cord that plugs into a regular outlet, but then they're charging super slow. And because that's kind of the next piece. What we're finding is that 80 to 90% of charging happens at home.
Yeah.
And unless you're going on that super long road trip, which is the thing that always gets focused on, it's the road tripping. And we do a lot of discussions on road tripping, how to plan for it, all that sort of thing, because that's a paradigm shift. But beyond that, the charging at home makes it already so much more convenient. I mean, how long does it
Gotcha.
take to charge? It takes me 10 seconds, right? I plug in, I let it charge, I unplug in the morning, I drive around, repeat.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's what I always tell people. It's like, how would you, it's like leaving every morning with a full tank of gas. I think that's the part they don't realize. And, certainly your cadence of charging may be a little bit more frequent. I think that's what people need to realize. It's like, I may charge 2 or 3 times over the course of a week, depending on my driving, rather than my one stop to the gas station every 2 weeks. But because it's so convenient, you really don't even notice anymore. In fact, I remember the first time last winter, I had to stopping at my wife's car gas, and it was cold, blowing, and I realized I haven't been to a gas station in like 3 months. This sucks. Like,
Yeah.
why do people
that's
do this?
that's
And it
hilarious.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was and it was just a weird kind of epiphany moment for me to be like, man, this is terrible, and this is why it's so much more of a convenient experience. Yeah, I pull in my warm garage, plug it in, and yeah, you're right. You forget about it till the morning. It takes 10 seconds. So yeah, it's a totally different deal that people just need to me, you're right. You get hooked by that initial like acceleration thing, but it's when you realize how could this actually work for me in my life. And when you tell people that, they're like, yeah, you just plug in at home and you're good to go. Full tank of gas, right, or equivalent, the minute you drive out of the driveway. And that's like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And when they really think about their driving habits, it's like, well, I guess I do just go to work, 5 days a week and maybe out for dinner on the weekend. And so it's like, yeah, so for that 99% of your driving, it works great. And I think what we've seen a lot too is what I call like, mixed garage homes, right? Maybe your spouse or significant other has a gas vehicle, and that enables you to do that kind of long road tripping if you're not comfortable with, planning a route ahead of time and things like that. But, that's really even going to be less and less necessary as we see this infrastructure get built out. And,
Mhm.
and I think it's going to really take away that anxiety too. So,
I mean, that's how I got started. My first EV was a 2012 Nissan Leaf with like 70 miles of range. And you think, well, that's pathetic. But the reality is I was doing 20 miles of commuting every day. On top of that, my employer had workplace charging. So I basically drove for free. but beyond that, we had a minivan, so that was our road trip vehicle.
Perfect.
And then, but it turned out for 90% of the driving that we did, unless we needed the 6 seats or all the storage space or anything like that, the Leaf was our go-to vehicle. So
Yeah.
Larry's got his hand raised. Go ahead, Larry.
Three things for you, Jeff. One, I want to know about what you did to get your charger in your garage. Like, did you already have a panel? Did you guys have to run? You have an attached garage? And then two, Zach and Jesse that have now, they coined a phrase, butts and seats, and I think that's what we're all kind of talking about. When you get an electric car, it's like you're getting your cake and eat it too, from that convenience to plug it in. And, since you're part of GM, Ford and GM, because you have your GM store up in Kalamazoo, when they first came out with the Volt, they were really working that angle, right? People not going to the gas station, forgetting how to, where is the gas station?
Yeah, well, I think whoever coined that borrowed it from the car business, because butts and seats is a maybe a cleaner version of what we have in the auto business as well. And because it's very common to us, it's that's the best way to sell the stuff, is to get you out, feel it, smell it, drive it. And actually, that reminds me, we did do a last summer, we did a ride and drive event when we had a Mach and a Lightning on site. Particularly for the folks, this is when we got our first demo Lightning. Ford has a program where they'll send you one of these units, and it's required to stay in your rental service for, I believe it's 6 months before you can sell it, which is I think is a great idea, because it compels you to keep it and have it on site so people can get those butts and seats and experience it. But when we got our first Lightning, we had a lot of reservation holders. We wanted to be able to see it, drive it. And so that was a really great experience for our staff to actually brush up on their knowledge. But it was a great experience, because we had, I don't know, 15 people, maybe tops, though, that came out and were able to ride and drive in these things. Most of them were reservation holders, but I think that's something we'll look to continue to expand, because I think that hook moment of the first time you accelerate it and you hear nothing and it's smooth, there's no shifting, that's what gets a lot of people, or at least that piques their interest enough to say, like, well, what would it take for this to be a vehicle that I could drive every day?
It's like, is this thing running?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I took, and that's my favorite thing to do here. It is, because we actually have a couple Mach-Es on the lot. I'm driving a Lightning personally. I love showing people, like, hey, have you driven an electric vehicle yet? Have you had a chance? And a lot of times it's, oh yeah, my brother-in-law's got a Tesla, it's crazy. But you have some people like, no, I never have, and I've always wanted to. And so I think we got to do a better job of just making those events available to the public. Again, when we made that list available to the reservation holders primarily, it's my intuition that most of those people had driven an EV already, and that's why they were already reservation holders. I think the key is getting the people that just really aren't into it to drive. I think of my mother-in-law saying that, that'll never be a thing. That's the infrastructure, all the lines, right? I'm like, just drive the truck. Let me take you for a ride in the truck. And and then she gets back, okay, that was pretty cool. It's like, all right, you could see the wheels start to turn. Yep. And I think that's really what it is. You got to just go where those people are that are really against it. It's like, just drive it, just experience it. You don't need to buy one, you don't need to be a big fan of them, but just drive it, and you'll get it. You'll get why people are passionate about them. So
right, it's more than just the ecological part of it and the money saving, right? So that's the other thing, is you plug this thing, and of course you're typically not charging from 0 to 100%, you're charging maybe from 20 to 80%. So then you see that report, like, I have a ChargePoint home charger, and it makes an estimate of my overnight charge, and it says, oh, last night's charge was $5. Like, whoa, that's like nothing, right? Compared to a tank of gas. But let me, back to your ride and drive events, let me just encourage you, please keep doing that, because that's, other than the liability issue, and I'm sure you guys already have that figured out. You let people go on test drives all the time. Right. In my world, for me to let somebody drive the company car, it's a different issue. But once they do that, once we're allowed to do that, it changes everything. And I always say, even my personal car, when somebody says, oh, well, I'll just ride along, I was like, no, you need to get behind the wheel. Right. And I know I personally had that experience. My first experience with an electric vehicle was in Germany. I was working for Bayer, and it was one of the chem parks. And the guy that did our vessel inspections had a test mule it was a Mini Cooper, which of course is a
Wow.
BMW. And the guy,
Cool.
and he came over, and I was one of the plant managers, and he came around and he's like, "You guys got to get in this. You got to try this." So we were driving around this chem park at like, 40 kilometers an hour or whatever the super low speed limit was. Right. And he's like, "You just got to drive this." And then just like the regen braking, you experience that. It's like, again, is this thing running? And then the smooth acceleration. And it was like mind blown. Right. And
Yeah.
that's when I started looking at Nissan Leafs. And when I came back to the States, I was going around with real estate agents looking at houses, and there was a guy across the street from one of the houses that was available for sale, and there was a Tesla there. So of course I go over and talk to the guy, and he's like, "Oh yeah, well, you got to drive it." So I'm like heading towards the passenger door, and he's like, "No, you got to drive it." It's like,
Yeah.
"You're letting me drive your $70,000 car?" It's like, "Yeah, you got to experience this." And again, I was blown away by the vehicle, but also by the passionate
Right.
nature of the owners. And that
Right.
again just totally changed me. And I have had a lot of people that have, once they get behind the wheel of my personal car and get out, they're like, "Okay, this was a life-changing experience." So again,
Yeah.
let me just do that again. Please do that whenever you can.
We
Ride and
definitely
drives
will.
and let them
Yeah,
get behind the wheel.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. Yeah, and I think to my first experience driving an EV, and I'm assuming, I think it was probably a Bolt. Obviously, Volt preceding that, that kind of had the same similar driving characteristics. And it's funny though. I do remember kind of I was impressed by the driving characteristics, but the thing that was tough is it felt like the Bolt was, what they call like just the compliance vehicle, right? It wasn't a particularly good looking vehicle. And I think what really clicked for me is one of the first introductory meetings we had when I was with Ford, when they kind of talked about why they picked the Mustang to be the banner with which they would launch their EV stuff. And I thought that was really compelling because they said, we want to attach it to our most iconic brand, or being the Mustang, right? What's more famous than that? We know will upset people because the V8s and this, whatever, but it's like, this is how important it is to us, is we're not going to build a compliance tic tac. We're going to build a good looking car. And I think that's something that Tesla did a great job early on too, is they have good looking cars, right? They're sleek, they've got good lines, particularly the Model S and stuff like that. And that's something I give Ford a lot of credit for, is the Mustang is a good looking car. It's got great lines, and they took a big risk by picking, such an iconic brand name to hang it on. And and I don't mean knock GM. I think they build great cars too, but it always felt like that car was just, oh, we're going to check the box. Yeah, we've got an EV too, and again, it's not a bad car, but I didn't sit in and say, man, I have to have one of these. First time I got in a Mach, I'm like, man, this is a cool car. And if I didn't have two little kids, I probably would get one. So yeah, I think that's been really the neat thing too, is you're starting to see the EVs being really good looking platforms. It's no longer just the kind of goofy looking like science experiment cars. They're actually cars that people want to drive. And I think that's where I've observed on our customer base side, early on, you had the early adopter of technology, right? The people that knew more about the car than you did probably were professor of electrical engineering or this or that, and it scared the crap
Physics.
out of her. Yeah, right. Or physics, whatever.
We happen to know
But
somebody at Western.
yeah, right. But it really, it scares, if you're a salesperson, right? You got a guy that walks in that knows more about the vehicle than you do. Like, that's an intimidating power dynamic, right? And I think that's where a lot of dealerships have gotten a bad rep of like not being knowledgeable. So, well, you guys know way more than we do, right? Both of you know way more about
we did all the research already.
Exactly. And we know some of the basic characteristics, but I think that's one of those things that it's like, those early adopters are very technically minded. They have a different set of expectations, and they want to know some specifications that you have to be really on the spot. And it takes a specific type of salesperson to be able to deliver on some of those things and have knowledge of all the other product lines. But I guess where I'm going with that is I've seen that shift a little bit from, it's not just the early adopters anymore. It's people that have had that experience. Like, hey, I rode in my brother-in-law's Tesla and it was amazing. And now I've seen this Mustang and I think I want to try it. We're starting to get into what I'll kind of call it the general public kind of generic consumer, which is really exciting because I think that's, you shared, I think, kind of that growth in
The S
technology
curve, the
chart with us,
adoption
the
S
S
curve.
curve.
Yep.
And I think we're really starting to get into that meat of that S curve because I'm getting people that I would say probably aren't your typical historical EV buyer that got really psyched about the Volt or really psyched about the Volt or the Prius or whatever. That, you know, are coming out of really high-end stuff too, coming out of BMWs and Mercedes and, you know, Cadillacs into these things that, you know, or even, you know, gas vehicles, right? Coming out of small pickup trucks or things like that. It's a really interesting clientele, and I'm excited to see that shift to kind of Joe consumer instead of, you know, the guy that, you know, has 6 PhDs and freaks out my salesperson because he doesn't even know how to hold a conversation with a guy, you know?
Right. And I had to laugh earlier, smirk anyway, because I'm looking at Larry because this is one of the conversations he and I have. You know, again, my first EV was a Nissan Leaf, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, that thing is so ugly. You can't get me to drive one of those."
Right.
Right. I liked how you put that science experiments, the Prius and the Leaf. Man, but when the Volt with the V, right,
Yeah.
came out, that was all right looking, especially the prototype, right?
Yeah.
Man, it almost looked Camaro like. But either way, and then I was super comfortable in it. And then I also was thinking that's how I first met Jeff. He came to one of our ride and drive events, Kiva, Kalamazoo electric vehicle that we put on up in Kalamazoo at Market Fresh every year. And he showed up. Was it a light blue, right? Mach E?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the
And
light
then
blue.
you were excited. That was cool.
Yeah,
And-
yeah. I ordered that actually for myself. We ended up selling it because, you know, that's what puts food on the table. But I ordered that for myself because I was so excited about it. And yeah, that car was incredible. I mean, and I think again that was another great one to just, you know, get a lot of people in seats. And for me, if I had a different life situation, that would probably be the car that I would prefer. But I've got will be having a third child here, and so the Lightning gives just a little more space, and I got a lot of stuff that you know, hauling gas cans and things like that at home. So I needed the truck platform for the weekends really, but during the week I'm a commuter. I commute probably 20 plus miles to and from, or probably 20 each way to Vicksburg and Kalamazoo and anywhere else in between. So I'm really a commuter driver, but again, I needed that application on the weekend where I can throw lumber or wood or whatever in the bath that I'm messing with at the hobby farm at the house, you know. So it's been a great platform for me. So that's the only reason. The only reason I got rid of it is I knew the Lightning was coming, and so I ordered one for myself that I was excited to take delivery of about a month ago. So
that's cool. Any luck on the van I got in the back?
You know, that's a good question. You know, I had the guys looking at it and they never followed up with me. So I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I'll have to check on that again. I know that had somewhat limited availability for a while. But transits, gas or electric, are usually pretty tough to get built. There's just a ton of demand. Ford's got a really great market share when it comes to commercial vehicles. They just build great vans and kind of work vehicles. And so any of those like Super Duty trucks, vans, there's just not a lot of other competing vehicles on the market. So they're kind of tough to get. But that's a good point. I'm going to make a note to check on that.
That's another great segue, though. I was going to talk about vehicle availability. You know,
Yeah.
I think in the early days, it was probably a struggle to get anybody, you know, to have enough demand to say, well, somebody actually wants an EV. But now I think we're at the point where the vehicle availability is a bottleneck. And I know there are a lot of people that I know, they're like, hey, I can't wait to get my F-150 Lightning or my Silverado, but I just can't get one, right? I was just at a meeting this morning with somebody with DNR, and I know DNR is interested in electrifying some of their fleet, and they're like, we just can't get the vehicles. So there's no point in putting charging stations in right now. Do you see anything on the horizon going on there with Ford or GM? I mean, we've kind of seen the news with Tesla, and then they lowered the prices, which is why I bought one recently. And, you know, they're able to crank them out. But what are the other OEMs doing that you're seeing?
Well, yeah, I think if I had a crystal ball on vehicle availability, I'd be a much richer man.
Yeah, of
But
course.
because that's probably been the number one struggle we've had for the probably 2021 on. Yeah, obviously 2020 with the pandemic had a lot of physical challenges on site with all the things we had, but economically 2021 and 22 were probably more adversely impacting our business because of the downstream effects of supply chain issues, and we still see that today. I would say it's getting better. I probably have the best new car availability that I've had in probably 2 years, really. I would get down to one or two or three new cars on the lot, which is pretty scary when I want to sell probably 30 or 40 a month. It's kind of hard to, stretch that to make that happen. But on the EV side, what was early on, which was frustrating, and I think this is starting to get a little bit better, was the fact that they were allocating much of the EV production to the ZEB states, so the zero emission states. I don't know if you're familiar with,
Right.
the certain
Mhm.
states that have regulations that require a certain percentage of production to be zero emission. And so California's, Colorado's, I want to say New Hampshire, places like that were getting the lion's share of production, even though we across the rest of the country had sold orders for those types of vehicles. We had a conversation with a high level executive at Ford, and he was like, hey, if we're going to make 20,000 Mach E's, 18 of them are required to go to ZEB states just to keep us compliant. That last 2,000 is what we got to spread the love to the rest of the states, the Texas, Florida, Michigan. I mean, think about it, right? So
Mhm.
it was really difficult for us because we had a lot of customers that were ordering vehicles, but we had no timeline as to when they could be available, and really poor communication as to what it could look like, as to how they could get it, or where they were in line, really, because you may have placed your order before somebody in a zero emission state, but the way their allocation was rerouting to those states, even if you placed your order earlier, it's not like that was your place in line. It was kind of divided up by what state you were in, which was frustrating for our people. Lightning, for instance, first model run, almost, I think every dealer in Michigan, and there may be some exceptions, most dealers that I know of in Michigan only got one Lightning in that first run. I had probably 30 or 40 reservations for them, of people that had placed, myself included. I was the number 2 reservation holder. I have a good buddy that snuck ahead of me. Apparently, I don't know how he got ahead of me. But we had that happen where, I probably put my order in seconds or minutes after he put his order in. And I took delivery of mine 8 months after he took delivery of his.
Yeah.
It's really odd.
Yeah,
So
it is odd. And you don't, your status doesn't help you. I mean,
yeah,
we've had some C-level executives here in the company that ordered vehicles like that, and they just couldn't get them. And of course, they're not used
right,
to being put on hold, so they're super frustrated.
sure,
But that's a good point about the ZV states, because I think the way it works is if the OEMs don't sell a certain number of their compliance cars, they're not allowed to sell any others. So they certainly have a
correct,
vested interest in making
yeah,
sure that those demands are met before they,
yeah.
before they satisfy anybody else.
Yeah, and we've struggled with that as well on, well, really any of the models. I mean, so plug-in
Mhm.
electric escapes. I'd love to have a plug-in electric escape, but we've never seen one here, and they're by and large getting routed to different markets. And I understand that. I don't want to be critical of that, but it is frustrating for, clients in our market that want to do that. But yeah, I would say it just generally, though, I think things are starting to loosen up on the availability. We started to see, actually, I have 2 stock Lightnings, which if you'd have told me even a month ago that I have 2 stock Lightnings. Now they're Lightnings that people canceled the reservations on, but still the fact that they haven't been snatched up tells me that people are starting to have a little more availability, start flushing through the system.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah, from a buyer perspective, we see reviews of different vehicles, and there was a vehicle that I'd had my eye on for years. It's not a Tesla, and all of a sudden, a friend of mine, actually a colleague of mine, showed up with one, and I was like, "Wait a minute, did you live in Michigan? How did you get that? Did you order it from out of state?" "Oh no, my local dealer had one." I was like, "Wait a minute, when did that happen?" So then I started looking around, and I, going all over the state, going to Saginaw, and, before
Yeah.
I did find one in Grand Rapids. And, for years I've been looking at the automotive industry and the YouTubers that are doing reviews of these vehicles. It's like, well, this is the one that I want, but then I can't get one.
Yeah.
And even if you bought one at the time, the problem was even if that brand had a dealership within the state, you wouldn't be able to get it worked on because they didn't have any certified mechanics. Now,
Sure.
there's not a lot that goes wrong with EVs, but as any new vehicle, there are going to be some teething pains, and they may
Yeah.
need a firmware update or something like that. And then the dealership just wouldn't have the laptop or the equipment to be able to service that. So there was really no
Yeah.
point in importing them from out of state.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so it'll be interesting. So, Ford has transitioned to what they've kind of broken off the business unit of Model E is their kind of silo for the electric vehicles, and they have some very specific training requirements, pretty robust training requirements that we're going to have to take advantage of, as well as a lot of tooling and special tools and things like that. We had to get a forklift to be able to obviously lift and move the batteries. We've been sending technicians to the specialized training to go along with it. But it's a pretty substantial undertaking on Ford's half, and it's very, very, very controversial within the dealer body, the way they've kind of rolled it out. It's kind of a one size fits all program. For your viewers, obviously I'm in Vicksburg, Michigan. It's not a particularly large community. I'm going to have 3 DC fast chargers on site out here in the cornfields, which is great. I mean, I'm excited to do that. But our comments to them were like, hey, don't put them all here on my site. Why don't I put one in Three Rivers, half an hour south here? How do I put one in Schoolcraft or in downtown Vicksburg? That's really going to enable your network to grow. Having them all here on my site doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I just don't have the demand right now for it. I'm happy to put them in as they come, and it definitely makes sense for me to have at least one.
But it's a serious investment, right? I mean,
it's
that's
a very serious, yeah. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're going to have to invest in this to participate in the program. But my understanding of that program is, some dealers will be allowed to have inventory of EVs on site. But so the middle tier, the lower level dealers, actually, I don't believe will have anything other than a demonstration unit, kind of like a Tesla showroom. They'll have one to show, and then if you want to order one, you can order one. So there's going to be really significant drop in on ground availability, and I'm not sure how Ford's going to be able to match their production to be able to provide those vehicles in a timely manner, because they've frankly not been able to demonstrate the ability to get these vehicles to our customers in a reasonable amount of time up until this point. Now I'm sure they'll ramp up to that, but it could end up being kind of an interesting inventory availability situation. And they're actually changing the channel through which you're ordering. You actually will order through Ford.com. They're really chasing Tesla's online purchase experience to really shorten that time if you prefer to do that. In theory, you could, in a matter of, I don't know, half a dozen clicks, order and purchase one of the Ford EVs all online. Now you'll have to work through a local dealer channel to actually take delivery of that. But that's a pretty radical departure from the existing model that they have. And I think time will tell as to whether that will hold up or succeed. I tried going through the process actually when my Lightning came in, and I was like, hey, if this is what my customer is going to experience, I'd like to experience it as well. So I tried to buy it online, and it didn't work, but it will at some point, right?
No, but that's great feedback, right? So
Yeah.
that's the same reason that I have all of the rebate eligible chargers in my garage that Consumers Energy has. I have a Charge Point Home, and I have an NLX juice box. I bought them with my own money, but if I'm going to interface with customers and know how to set those things up, then I need to experience that and know how they work. So I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, we try to go, and again, obviously for us as a dealer, I mean, one of the things I love about the business that I'm in is it's still a relationship business, right? We have long-term multi-generational family customers that, it's not even about the purchase experience. I mean, we love when they come back and purchase, but you really see people a lot more frequently throughout their service experience and things like that. And I think that, you know, you talk about the direct to consumer slash dealer channel model. I will, and again, understanding that I'm extremely biased in this debate, I think we provide a unique value to a community, right? I mean, we sponsor the little leagues, we sponsor the, you know, golf outings for charities and things like that, and participate in the community. We're hiring all of our local people, right? I mean, you don't have some executive from whatever headquarters coming in and frankly, those profits and everything like that happens stay in this community, which is great too. And so I think for us, we want to continue to route that purchase experience through the dealer so that we can develop the relationship with a customer, and that when they have issues, we can assist them and support them. If they didn't get a great orientation of the vehicle initially, have them come back in so we can show them any features that are changing, because that's one of the great things about these vehicles now. They're getting over the air updates and you're changing the interface of the vehicle. Well, hey, if one of those goes bad, or maybe an elderly customer that doesn't quite understand, wait, I used to know where this was, now it changed. We see that all the time with the existing infrastructure, where, you know, interface for the infotainment system for the customer, where they'll come back and say, hey, I had my phone paired, and you guys paired it for me when I bought it. Now it's not paired. I don't know how to repair it. That kind of stuff. I mean, we still need to be there to do it. You know,
and that's not insignificant. I actually helped a customer of ours program her Mach for home charging to make sure that she took advantage of the overnight charging. And
right.
I have to say, I struggled a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm pretty tech savvy and I know EVs. And I couldn't figure out, like, well, do we do this on the app, on the Ford app? Do we do it on the screen? And I think what it ended up being is that the charging schedule was localized. You had to create a home feature. So like there could be a different charging schedule for home and work. And that's the part that she didn't understand and I had to grasp because I'd never had a Ford. So no, I think that's an important point. One of the first times I had to get service on my older Tesla before the Grand Rapids Service Center was there, I literally had to drive to near Chicago to get something done. And now most of the stuff that Tesla does, they have mobile service, but this was something apparently they felt needed to be done. And boy, what a pain in the butt that was, right? So I know I do understand that the dealership network and the maintenance and the relationship building is important. I think maybe one thing where people really like the Tesla-like experience, and maybe also Carvana or whoever you want to throw in there, is this idea of a fixed price. I think that's maybe where people struggle, and I won't name the brand, but I helped my in-laws purchase a vehicle in Phoenix, Arizona, and you know, working with a dealership and this whole thing with markups recently, and you know, at first it's like, well, are you marking up vehicle? I just want to know, right? And they said no, and then it turned out, well, they did. You know, and this is the kind of thing that just leaves the, you know, stuff sticking in your throat. It's like, well, that doesn't seem honest. And then afterwards try to sell me other stuff. So I don't know if you can address those kind of things as you don't have to tell me, but maybe as a piece of advice, if people feel like they're getting a nickel and dime along the way, or they have to go through this negotiation phase, which for some people, they love it. My brother-in-law, for him, it's like a sport. But for me, I hate that. I mean, I'd say, and hate is a strong word, but it's one of those things where if you could just tell me this is the price of the vehicle with these features, then I can decide in my mind, is it worth it for me to plunk down my hard-earned cash to buy that vehicle? Because it's a major investment, whether you're buying an EV or an ICE vehicle these days.
Yeah. Well, I guess to start out, I maybe give your philosophy on the pricing stuff. So we generally don't have any sort of pricing addendums. If we ever did, they're fully disclosed. But the biggest honestly, one of the biggest reasons we ever had them, when we had no availability of Broncos or Lightnings or things like that, if you were to put a Bronco, you know, Wild Track Bronco out on your website at MSRP, at the time I had 2 salespeople. They would get hundreds of phone calls and emails from all over the country, California, New York, Florida. And in some ways it's like, hey, great, you know, those are leads, that's opportunities. Well, I don't want to sell that car to California or to Florida. I want to sell it to Larry in Kalamazoo, who's going to come service with me and again build a relationship with me. And so a lot of times our philosophy was it was a deterrent to the outside market. And then certainly if we ever had somebody come in, it was, if you're a local customer, no, it's a sticker price transaction for those customers. You know, we're not in the business of ever, making unfair profit. I think the thing that was really, if we ever did list something for over MSRP, what we would do, so we get wholesaler inquiries quite frequently, particularly when you have high demand inventory. So say I had, again, a stock Lightning or something like that. At one time early in that life cycle of that vehicle, you would have wholesalers say, hey, I'll give you $30,000 over MSRP for that car. Right. And I'm a small store, right? I may sell 10 new cars a month, right? Especially when inventory is low. So for me to go to my sales manager, my sales staff and say, hey guys, we could go sell this vehicle for $30,000 over sticker and make everyone's month, right? Make 2 months for everybody. Or we can just sell it to, Joe down the street for sticker. That's a difficult conversation. That's folks that it's affecting their livelihood because again, we had such low availability of vehicles and the market was commanding that sort of price. Because reality is, think about that. The wholesalers tell me, hey, $15,000 or $20,000 over sticker. Who's he selling it to? And then that guy's, what's he charging the end consumer? It's just, that was a crazy thing to me is how that ever worked. But so what we would always do, our rule is whatever the wholesale market was, we do 50% of that. So if it was a Lightning was 10 over, we put it online for 5 over so that, we wouldn't get the phone calls all day long. And if somebody calls us from Chicago or California and says, hey, it's funny. We'll get calls even still. People are like, "Hey, will you really honor that price?" It's like, yeah, I don't really want to sell it to you if you're from North Carolina. Again, for all the reasons I lined before, but we will do that. We'll honor the price. It's not like we're gonna say, "Oh no, you're from out of state. We're gonna charge a higher price," than what I've got it listed for. If we put it online, it'd be unethical and illegal to then kind of basically bait and switch, say, yeah, it was online for 10 over, but you're from California, so it's 20 over. You couldn't do that. Nor would we.
Yeah.
But specifically to the pricing thing as well, that is one of the requirements of the Ford Model E program, is that you set transparent pricing on any vehicles that you're listing out there. So that whole transaction is very transparent on the website as to what, if any, additional, market adjustments or whatever you want to call them are on that. So that customer at the time of order or purchase has full transparency to that, to the point of actually Ford is verifying. We have to send in documentation to affirm, basically our state documentation to affirm that we honor that price through the final transaction as well. So there's a lot of work being done to affirm, not only because I think there's two things at play, right? There's, marking it up and not telling somebody or being dishonest. And then there's the other piece of it's like, hey, if we have to charge a different market adjustment price, are we very transparent about it? And you're making an informed decision as to whether you want to do that. In either case, it's not great, and I think they want to get rid of that. But at least in that second scenario, Ford's going to step in and say, we're going to really verify that whatever you advertise for, you actually ended up charging at the end of the day. So,
hey, and I really appreciate that insight because we see it from the customer side, and we don't see that side of it. And I understand that the pricing, whatever you decide to do, can put you into a difficult situation. So thanks for elaborating on that. And Tesla does this stuff too. I mean, I ordered that Model Y and immediately they realized, oh, there's so much demand, we're gonna jack the price up again. So within the matter of a couple of weeks, they also did market adjustments, whatever you want to call it. It's transparent. The moment you click order vehicle, you're locked into that. But at the same time, there are a lot of people that are ticked off that, if you ordered 6 months ago, you paid a lot more and you weren't eligible for a tax credit and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's always tough, right?
Yeah, well, and I think what's tough for us is to have the manufacturer kind of come out and chastise, because don't get me wrong, there are bad dealers out there that
Of
make
course,
no
yeah.
mistake about it, right? There are people doing some pretty nasty things. I mean, even in our market, there's stuff that I would never do or condone.
And that gives
But
everybody a bad name, right? That's
yeah,
the
exactly.
few
Right? I
bad
mean,
apples kind of thing.
yeah, but I think the other thing too is to have the manufacturer like come out and kind of scold the dealers, but then all of our manufacturers have increased base prices on vehicles. I understand that there are elements to that of cost of materials and things like that, but it is a little ironic when it's like, well, I'm going to publicly shame you guys, but then we're going to go turn around and raise prices on everything. It kind of leaves a bad taste. But it's funny. My theory on transparency in the car business, which again, I mean, I think my grandfather always would say, always tell the truth and you'll never have to remember what you said, right? And so that's kind of we try and live through that with how we transact with people. But I've always felt that people are so skeptical of their vehicle transaction that we are being looked at under a microscope anyway. So that's what I always tell my people is like, again, we're not going to do the wrong thing anyway, but understand that everybody that comes in here has watched 60 Minutes or heard the NPR article. Like they're going to watch you like a hawk. So even the implication of impropriety cannot be accepted, right? Like we want to be so transparent with everything we do because you're under a microscope. And I think that holds us to a little bit of a higher standard because you're going to be watched like a hawk by every customer because they have that experience or thought that, hey, these guys there's an angle here. And it's like, just know that, I don't even want people to think that could have happened to them through this experience. And so,
That's a
but
great
it's tough.
attitude.
I mean, there's certainly negotiation that happens and our industry, it ebbs and flows. And it's been a really weird time for pricing. I mean, I remember the first 3 years we were here, I could probably count on one, maybe two hands, the number of times we even charged MSRP. Everything was significantly discounted. So to have it kind of swing the other way in a matter of months was kind of shocking for everybody, I think.
And I wanted to point out too, as a dealer, we're fortunate here. You've been to our last EV meeting, and like I pointed out, you showed up at the our park and ride event, and so really appreciate that. I think we're super fortunate, and so good on you.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. And again, I think that's a great group of, again, when you talk about kind of those early adopters, these are the people that are really passionate about EV. And that's one of the things that I've been attracted to it is like the people that are in it, like love it, right? It's definitely like a movement kind of thing. And so that it's fun to be around people that are that passionate about anything, but to kind of share a little bit of that passion is kind of a neat group of people. But yeah, I think that's the thing is it's been great to watch the people that are buying EVs switch from the people that are kind of those really enthusiastic people to Joe, your neighbor that would have never guessed, but he's in looking for an EV. And to me that's the exciting part about the space. And that was part of the catalyst of starting the EV evolution business too.
Yeah, in fact, I was just going to say, why don't we switch gears? That's a great segue again. So one of the things that, the average person who's not an EV early adopter or enthusiast is not going to know a lot about charging. And I think that's often where you get hung up. So walk us a little bit through that evolution, no pun intended, of, why you decided to also get into the EV home charger installation.
Well, yeah, I think the best way to describe it would be telling the story of, I guess, how I started. So probably 2 years ago, a little over, I don't even more than that. My dad had ordered a Mach for himself to drive. And actually, funny enough, like my mom was the classic like range anxiety. I don't even want to drive it. The minute she drove it, it wasn't his anymore. It became mom's car. So she took the Mach that was he ordered for himself. But he ordered it, and being a first edition, it came with one of the Ford factory chargers. But it didn't come with any kind of installation information, and it came much later than the vehicle actually arrived. And when it showed up, I kind of dipped my toe in it a little bit, but I didn't know too much about it. But I'm like, hey, Dad, you're gonna want a level 2 at the house, and I didn't really know what I was talking about. I kind of explained, well, the charger that comes with it, it's fine, but it's probably not gonna, if you're fully depleted, overnight, you're not gonna get anyway. So we kind of get to talking about, okay, yeah, we'll put it in. What comes with this one? He ends up probably waiting, I think, 3 or 4 weeks before the thing even shows up. And then we have to get a quote to have somebody come out to look at it. It probably takes a week or two to get a quote or two of people. And to be fair, his installation was pretty complex because of detached garage and things like that. But it took another week or so to get the estimates in, and then decide, okay, we're gonna have these guys do the install. It takes them another couple of days to get it installed before all in, you're about a month and a half away from purchase point. And he's been driving an EV. Now, fortunately, we had obviously chargers at work that he would be able to take advantage of. But I'm thinking to myself, if this is an average consumer that doesn't have access to a work charger, that's a pretty untenable driving situation. If you're going to be a daily driver of an EV and you don't have a level 2 at your home, you better have one at work, or where you're going. So that was kind of the initial catalyst as well. I envisioned a day, because up until this point, we had obviously sold Bolt EVs and things like that. But oftentimes those people were, again, so knowledgeable. They already had addressed that. Like, hey, I already put a charger in. I bought my own. I got this. I got that, and this is why. And we're like, okay, yeah, great. Hey, here's your car,
Right. But now comes the average person
exactly.
that says, oh, well, I hear you need something super expensive and high
Right.
power, and I have no clue. And yeah, so maybe I shouldn't even be buying this car.
Yeah.
So, and that's the scary part. So
that was exactly right. So I kind of had this envision of there's going to be a day where I have 5 or 10 of these Mach-E's out there, and I'm going to do what I do and say, just drive it, just go take it for a spin, right? And they're going to drive and say, that's the greatest car I've ever driven in my life. I want to take this car home. What am I going to do to charge it? So my vision originally was, can I give you a transparent price and a reasonable timeline to have it installed so that you can include it in your financing of your vehicle, because it is relatively expensive.
that's important to a lot of people, right?
And so
the
that
monthly payment.
At point of sale, we have visibility to what it's going to take to install a charger at your home. So that was kind of the original vision, was doing that. So I had a good buddy at Webster Electric, grew up with him through high school, just probably one of my best friends growing up, who took over an electrician shop in town. And so I kind of got with him. I said, hey, can you get me just kind of a standard installation price? Like, if it meets these criteria, tell me what it is. Whatever the number is, great. We'll figure it out, and give me a deal, because I'm going to send you a bunch of them. So let me get some scale, so that I can offer something to the customer. And I'll go get these chargers, and we'll package it, and commit to me that you'll be able to get installations done within 48 hours of me calling you. And he was willing to do that. So that's kind of the initial deal. Is I got a couple of chargers. Same thing. I kind of bought a couple different ones, tried them, see what made sense, what didn't make sense, what worked with it, and stuff like that. We did a couple installations. And yeah, so the whole idea to be able to just say, hey, for whatever it is, $2,200, we can have a charger put in your home, as long as it meets X, Y, and Z. We can include that in your financing, like an accessory on the vehicle transaction. And then by the end of the week, you're going to have a charger at your house. That was, again, the whole idea initially of what we were thinking. Now, as it happens, things kind of change in the way the market has gone for the last 2 years. We've certainly done plenty of installations, but because there's been such low availability, people have 6-month lead time before they know their EV is going to show up. So we're still happy to do the installation, and we'll talk to them at the point of which they order. Say, hey, if you want to do this, we can throw the charger in for you, so it's ready to go when you get there. And we've done that for probably a couple dozen of our clients up until this point. But we're only now starting to be the point where I have EVs kind of on the lot, where I feel like Joe consumer will come up and want to buy one. So I think the best is yet to come on that side of it. But that's kind of the long and short of how it all started initially.
Mm-hmm.
How was your garage? What did you experience? So you had your dad, It took like almost 2 months. How about your personal?
Yeah, so I ended up getting an NLX 40 that I've got a ton of them in stock. So I just took one of mine from stock and have the guys install it. I had I want to say, when did I get that?
That's
I
the
think I
NLX
got
juice
it.
box, right?
Yeah, juice box. Yeah, I
Mhm.
got it before I got the Mach, the blue Mach GT. Um, and yeah, it was pretty easy. Obviously, because I knew the guys, and I've gotten to know the installer, not only the owner of the electrician outfit, but some of the installation guys too. But it was pretty easy. I mean, they went over to the house. I wasn't even there when they did it, and I have a pretty easy short run. I mean, it's literally pretty much you just go up from the box over. It was probably less than a 20 foot run to get it into the garage. And it's the only controversy is I had to switch parking spots with my wife, which we got over pretty quick. So
And that's a great way to handle it, to take some of the pricing out of it. I mean, we get that
yeah,
question all the time. Well,
yeah,
how much does it cost? Well, the
yeah,
answer, unfortunately, is it depends. But if you
sure,
put it in context of this standard installation, right,
yeah,
that, you said yours was an easy run. My first house where I put an EV, the breaker box was right underneath the garage. I had a
mhm,
200 amp panel, so I had plenty of capacity. So the wiring run was short. They were able to, from my basement behind the rafters, drill right through to the front of the garage wall. And it cost me $300 to have at
yeah,
that time a NEMA 1430 outlet put in,
yeah,
which again, I didn't know what I was doing. I should have put a
sure,
1450, but it was
yeah,
the Nissan Leaf at the time had a 3.6 kilowatt onboard charger, so I didn't know any different.
right,
But so that's a good way to do it. And if you say, well, this is the fixed price with a normal installation, you can kind of say with, X amount of wiring and not a detached building. And, here are the bullet points, what makes it a standard installation. And if it gets beyond that, then we have to discuss it. If we have to do a
yeah,
panel upgrade, that's a different discussion.
yeah,
But at least you can give somebody a ballpark number and say, well, this is what it's going to be.
sure,
And oh, by the way, if you pick one of these chargers, NLX Juice Box or a ChargePoint Home, and you're a consumer's customer, you can get $500 off. So that's
right.
another little incentive.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that's been the biggest thing is kind of what you're describing is trying to take the complex and make it easy. Actually, the
Mhm.
first trade name I was under was Easy EV. That was the kind, and I've kind of expanded that out to Easy Evolution. But the whole idea was making it easy because, again, the average Joe consumer doesn't understand, doesn't know what a NEMA outlet is, doesn't know what amperage their current service is, and so that's really the space that I've found to fill is just to kind of take it reminds me of the days I worked in our service department. I'm taking what the technician is saying and talking to the end consumer and say, hey, this is
Right.
what it means that your cam phasers have gone bad or something like that. And so taking that technical and making it into a consumable piece and kind of inserting myself in between to advocate on behalf of the customer with the electrician as well, is where that value comes in for them to say, hey, this is the basic installation and this is what we found and this is what that means as to why you may or may not qualify. But yeah, I would say probably 70 or 80% of the installations I've done have fit the basic criteria of our standard, and probably north of 80% actually have fit that basic criteria. But my thing is always when in doubt, like send me some pictures, like let's just jump on the phone. I'll work through it. And that's kind of what in talking to other people that have gone through installations, they're like, hey, I've called, I'll get people that call me out of the blue, like, hey, great, I see that you do this. I can't find anybody that knows how to do it or is willing to do it. And I think the electricians will catch up with that, right? They'll figure out, oh yeah, it's pretty basic installation. We just need to run some wire, blah, blah, blah. But for
But there
those
are
guys,
nuances, right?
there's
So,
nuances. And
right, I mean,
I
an electrician will know how to put in a 50 amp range plug, which is essentially the same thing.
yeah,
But the nuance comes in, where do you put it in the garage? I
yeah,
mean, the electrician that put it into my house here in 2018 had the outlet the wrong way, which isn't a big deal. I mean, you pop a couple of screws off, you turn it, but it
yeah,
was just little things like that and how high it needs to be off the ground. And oh, by the
yeah.
way, where is the vehicle charge port? And
Mhm.
so, that maybe I don't have to swap parking spaces with my spouse. so that the charger can reach the charge point where it's convenient.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I've gotten a lot of joy out of being able to help people kind of work through that process. And my thing is always, when in doubt, yeah, just send me pictures and we'll walk through it. And if if the pictures and their description are even a little bit shaky, I'm dispatching somebody out there. Either I'm going to go out there and actually inspect it, or I'll have somebody else go out there. Because the last thing I want to do too is kind of have that, I don't want somebody to say like it was kind of a bait and switch situation where you told me it was going to be X and it really turned out to be Y. We want to be really, really thorough with that process of saying, if I tell them, hey, it's got to be less than 50 linear feet from, and like, oh, it's about, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 50. It's like, well, let me just have somebody
Yeah,
go
by the
out
time
there.
you run the wire into the corner around and where it
Yeah.
needs to go, it's a little
Yeah.
longer.
So
Right.
in those situations, and usually people are understanding about that, and I kind of prep them, and I have some standard formulas to say that I've worked out with those guys too, to say, and generally, if there's any incremental extra work, like that's just whatever they're charging me to do it. I pass that right through the customer, right? And I'm kind of beating them up a little bit and saying like, well, okay, what did you add? All right, well, are you sure that took an hour and a half? Like, all right, yeah, we'll work with you on this or that and stuff. So I kind of try and be an advocate for the customer in that way too, to make sure that, because I've been so familiar with a couple of the installations, we're making sure that it's going to be something that's fair and that makes sense. And then, yeah, apply some basic formulas so that it's equally applied when we have extra linear feet of cable that goes in, or the customer's outside of the existing service range or something like that. So,
and again, I want to point out that we're so fortunate to have a dealer that's, passionate about it, understands it, willing to help out. Because I don't think that's, you know what I mean? It's probably 1 in 100, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not the standard. And that's really great to see. I mean, there are a lot of people getting into the space, but to have maybe this sort of hometown feel to it as well, somebody
Yeah.
that you've dealt with before. I mean, Consumers has gotten into this space as well. We have a list of electricians that we work with. And you can go that route. You can get an estimate. You can go to Easy Evolution. I know Q Merit is out there for some of the dealership. But I mean, there are still some subtle nuances, but the good thing is that we're getting to that point where it's becoming a little bit more of a commodity and it's a little bit less scary. So you can start to tell people, well, I think it's going to be about in this price range, and this thing that you're reading on some forum somewhere on the internet that it's going to be, $2,000 to install it for a standard installation. That's probably not true. You should probably look into this a little bit more.
Sure.
Well, yeah, we love having you in the neighborhood, so to speak, Kalamazoo, and being part of this community. And as Larry said, also coming out to events and showing some of the vehicles. People always want to see the shiny new vehicles.
Yeah.
And there's some other opportunities coming up here. Drive Electric Earth Day. I don't know if Paul Pancella has been in touch. He's running an event down in Kalamazoo. I believe it is on Earth Day on the 22nd. I don't know if it works out, but there'll be more of those. We do those on Earth Day. We do those in September for National Drive Electric Week, and be lots of opportunities.
Carl, we also partnered up with, what is it?
So there's a national organization, the Electric Vehicle Association, and so we have the Southwest Michigan chapter of that, and we kind of merged that, if you will, with Kiva. It's kind of, there's a lot of overlap there. We certainly didn't want to take away the spirit and camaraderie of Kiva. And, there's a Facebook group that I run here in West Michigan that has about 700 members. So there's a lot of overlap. There are events that tend to be attended by people from Kiva, people from Southwest Michigan EVA, and then, other local organizations.
Also, one of the advantages, that's what I was going to bring up about us joining. We have a rider policy, right? That kind of helps us to the right and drive, or is that what we're working on? I was trying to.
Yeah, we need to look at the specifics, but the national organization, the Electric Vehicle Association, they do have some insurance so that if you have an event that as a club, as a chapter, then you are covered by those policies. So you can do things like ride and drives and things like that. So obviously each event is a little bit different because it also depends on, whose parking lot is it in, things like that. This is America. Unfortunately, liability is always an issue. But yeah, there are some things like that that make the ride and drives more possible. And as I said earlier, the ride and drives are just a super way to get people, in the butts in those seats.
Yeah. Are you starting to see more kind of average consumers, or is it still mostly enthusiasts that are showing up to those types of events?
It really depends on the event. For example, a lot of the Earth Day, Earth Month kind of events tend to be more the folks from the environmental side. But the other one events like National Drive Electric Week, we're starting to see more mainstream, just like you were saying. The people that are very brand loyal, and you had kind of mentioned that earlier. I'm seeing a lot of people who said, I see what Tesla is doing. I don't like Elon Musk or what he's doing, but I'm a Ford family. And there's a guy we had originally on our podcast who was into Mustangs. So, I mean, he came home in a Ford LTD from the hospital, and he has a Mustang GT convertible. And then when it was time to add another vehicle to the family, he decided to get a Mach E. And so I have some great pictures of these two beautiful Mustangs next to each other. And he kind of embodies the person who embraced the whole
Yeah.
crossover from Mustang, going from the big V8 to the electric. So you have those folks who are just absolutely brand loyal. And it same kind of thing. You have people who are like, yeah, F-150, great, whatever. I'm a GM family. I'm waiting for the Silverado. I'm waiting
Right.
for the Blazer, the Bull TV, whatever. I'm going to get a Blazer or an Equinox or something like that when they come out, because that speaks to me.
Sure. Speaking of events, we're planning on doing a few this year as well. If anybody's interested in attending, we've got we'll probably do an unveiling of we have a 175 kW NLX unit at the Chevrolet store that we are fighting like mad to have actually public available. We're hoping to have that here soon, and once we have that, probably in the spring, we'll do an unveiling for that. We've got a car show. It's the DeNooyer Dust Off. It's the 4th annual car show. Mostly, muscle cars. We actually had a little mix of everything in that too over the years, and that's on May 6th. And then I want to do a dedicated EV. We do cars and coffee up at the Chevy store, just kind of a drive-in kind of Saturdays. We'll have a food truck or coffee truck come in and kind of do that. We'll cover all the coffee for everybody to just kind of come and talk cars, but we'll probably do an EV dedicated cars and coffee down here at Ford. And that's part of, so actually for 2023, I, as general manager here, kicked off with 5 key objectives for DeNooyer Ford. I would say they're really more long-term goals of ours, but one of the key 5 goals that I've been talking with our staff about is I want to be the EV destination for Southwest Michigan. That means I want to be stocking used ones so we can sell them. I want to stock all the new ones we can sell, and I want to educate specialists in every department that really can speak to whether it is mainstream consumer or that really technically minded customer. So that we've been conscientious about that with our hiring, as we've hired different staff and trainings and things like that. But that's really truly the goal for me, is to be, if somebody wants to buy an EV in Southwest Michigan, I want to be the first place they look. So I've actually started listing all of our EV inventory on the Easy Evolution website. So we have a one-stop shop for people to see what we have in stock, whether it be plug-in hybrids or battery electric vehicles. But anything we can do to kind of enable that process and bridge the gap to those mainstream customers. I mean, it's on every email that I send out to the all staff when we do it, is here are the 5 key goals, and become Southwest Michigan's EV destination is one of our 5 key long-term goals.
Maybe send us an email of those dates, and then
we can work together.
Carl, we can maybe put those dates in the notes underneath, right?
Yes, we can.
YouTube.
Yeah. But also, again, social media is really powerful for that sort of thing.
Sure.
And I think, just back to the type of events you're talking about, it's great to have all EV events, but I do think like the cars and coffee, where you have a little bit of everything, because we have a lot of people that they have their EV as their daily driver because it's cheap to drive, but man, they have that classic muscle car sitting right next to it that drips oil and makes lots of noise and is fun at the track. and there's nothing wrong with that. So
Right.
let's do the migration that way. You know,
Yeah.
I was into
Hey.
Porsches, and I was into, you know,
Yeah.
tricked out Subarus, and but I love my EVs too.
Well, that's what I tell people is like EV people are car people too, and I think that's the thing that people don't realize, right? I mean, everyone, I'm a car guy. Well, EV people are car guys too,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
this
it's
whole
like,
thing about EVs have no soul. All I can
yeah,
tell you is do a launch, and you're going to change your
yeah,
mind.
right,
But
right.
we've had luck going up to the Gilmore, and then there's another car show, and we've really well accepted. I wasn't sure. We started probably 3-4 years ago, but we'll show up and have one of our meetings at the Gilmore Wednesday night, right? They have a
Yeah,
hot rush.
they do.
And there's another it's like between Battle Creek and there's a little car museum there. I can't think of the name of it. But anyways, another weekly that was just hot rods, and we would show up with 5, 6, sometimes 20 EVs would show up, and great questions, and everybody's happy to have us. So it's really blending well.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
good.
sure.
Yeah, we'll stay in touch on that. And yeah, any other final thoughts, Jeff, from your side?
No, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me talk and ask some questions, and yeah, hopefully you can get a different perspective on, you know, how the dealers approach it. And again, I think we're probably maybe a little bit unique as to how we're approaching it. But I would also tell you that, you know, whoever your dealer is locally, they by and large want to take care of you, and they want to be knowledgeable and deliver a good experience for people. It's, you know, and I think as we see it ramp up into the mainstream, I think it's going to be more and more prevalent where you have a little bit more knowledge base on it. It's just still such a small penetration, you know, of what these guys need to know. They need to know the towing capacity of an F-250 and you know, the cargo space of an Explorer. And so, you know, it's going to take them a minute, but they'll start learning things like the range and, you know, kilowatts per mile and this kind of stuff that we like to talk about. But
And you
yeah,
also have
no,
to be cognizant that an EV, there's not necessarily, particularly right now, an EV that fits every need.
for sure.
So, you know, the fact that you can say, well, look, I want you to have a good experience, but in this case, the EV is not going to be the right choice for you. Right.
Yeah.
So if I need to transport 6 people across the country, chances are I'm going to be renting a minivan. If I need to tow a horse trailer up to the UP and I can't stop, you know, right now the diesel truck is still going to be the answer for you.
Well, and I think the thing for us too is, you know, in some ways you almost didn't want to get the mainstream consumer excited about it because you couldn't even get it for them, right? I can't even fit the demand for the enthusiasts, let alone getting, you know, the mainstream customer all excited about it. The last thing I want to do is get them all excited about a Lightning and tell them, oh yeah, and by the way, it's gonna be 2 years, you know, because, you know, that's and so that's where, again, I think as they become more available, hopefully that will help, where it's like, okay, let's start having a conversation. It's when you came in to look at F-150 Power Boost hybrid, let's take a look at the Lightning while you're here, you know, just take it for a drive, see it, think about it. And I've had actually this week, I've already had 2 or 3 people came in looking for F-150s that have driven my Lightning. Now they ended up with a gasoline application for one reason or another, but that's like, someday that I'm gonna get that, basically. You know, it's like maybe for my next one when I retire or whatever it may be. So it's happening. But yeah, and again, I appreciate you guys giving some visibility to Easy Evolution. I think that's something I'm really looking to grow this year. We're looking to invest some extra money into that as an organization. So I've kind of got the buy-in from the rest of our group. Which would be really exciting because it's going to give us a lot more access to the horsepower of our organization when it comes to some of the marketing things and things like that. So we can start to get that name out there a little bit more. And we didn't talk much about commercial applications, but that's something that I'm looking to kind of continue to grow as well. We're doing some commercial quoting and jobs right now, talking to municipalities, golf courses, hotels, car dealers.
Maybe that's a conversation for another time. I know we've already gone for like well over an hour, but that's a great conversation because we also have we being consumers, we have a fleet program, Power My Fleet. So that's a separate discussion maybe. And also, again, we're back to availability of vehicles in that space. And then the charging also looks very, very different in in that space.
Yeah,
So
for
that
sure.
might be a good conversation for another time. I'm
Yeah,
also
definitely.
thinking that maybe when we start planning events, we can just have maybe another short discussion and talk about those events and who's going to be there and that sort of thing. So we
Sure.
can follow up with you again if that's okay with you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, again, Carl and Larry, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right. Then
Have a good night.
we'll be in touch another time, and we'll put all your links and everything in the show notes, and
Awesome.
people can follow up with you. So again,
Good
thanks
deal.
for your time.
Thanks, guys. Yep, have a good one.
All right, take care.
Yeah, bye.
If you enjoyed or learned from this episode of Zero E Michigan, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Visit our YouTube channel for other related videos at youtube.com/@0E-Michigan.